So I've been sitting here looking around trying to decide. I was going to do this video, harping on the millennials and Gen Z again and talk about who is the hardest working generation there is. And then you get thinking about it, and it's neither. It's not any of us. It's not us Xers. It's not millennials. It's not Gen Z. When it comes right down to it, the hardest working generation in history would definitely be the greatest generation. The generation that earned that title like no other ever could. They sat there and they fought a world war, a real world war. They devastated 50 countries, hundreds of cities, millions upon millions of people homeless and killed and everything else, just leveled it. And when it was over, they put it all down and they rebuilt everything in such a short time span that it was rebuilt and it was ready for when the boomers became of age to take their place in the world. That is the greatest generation of all time. They earned that spot and nobody can ever argue otherwise, no matter what. If you try, you need to be tossed out an airplane at about 10,000 feet. You understand me? So let's take it ahead now to our time. Who's the hardest working generation now? Gen X, Millennials, or Gen Z? Well, I guess that all depends, because I came across this study, but it was in 2016, so there was no Gen Z in the workplace then, really. They were just coming into their teens, the earliest of them, barely teenagers, And it stated that millennials are the hardest working generation, but they were 50% of the generational workforce in 2016. I mean, us Xers were about 30% of the workforce. And it determined that they were the hardest working because they want to see themselves as martyrs in the workplace when it comes to work. A false sacrifice in order to toot their own horn, which I found kind of disturbing. I mean, everybody wants to kind of toot their own horn at work and think they're great, but they had this thing where they adamantly believed that they couldn't ever take vacation because nobody else in the company would ever be able to do the job they do when they were on vacation. Well, that's a serious falsehood, because rule one, numero uno, I will tell you this when it comes to that. Gen Z, you got to learn this too right now, because you're all coming into the workforce big. Everyone is replaceable. There's always somebody ready to step up and move into your spot. How do you make yourself truly invaluable? You can't anymore. They're always looking to push you out unless you got a skill that nobody else has, which these days, a work ethic would be just about all you need. Seriously, a good work ethic would be the only skill you need in order to be invaluable to somebody. But don't think there's anything of company loyalty, because companies ain't loyal to their employees. When they talk about they wouldn't take vacation and they wouldn't take the extra time off or want to leave early to be with their family and crap like that, right? Well, you know what? Gen X figured out awfully early on, and we were the ones that touted and started the whole work-life balance, because we realized we also had a saying, especially if you worked in a trade or a hard job or a big manual job. I mean, they were good pay, but people looked down on them because it was physical work. That started in our generation. They started pushing everything in computers and learn to program and tech because that was the future. And they started looking down on tradespeople and people that worked with their hands and did physical, actual work. But guess what? We understood work-life balance because we had a saying, and that is work hard, you play hard. And we would. You'd go decompressing because we're the guys that do the fishing and we're the guys that do the hunting. Or we like to sit around and work in our shop, and you'll work on your vehicles, and people are like, oh, that's just more work. No, that's not just work. That's enjoying yourself, relaxing time, sitting in the shop, working on your vehicle, maybe building something for your kids. My own brother-in-law just figured out in the last year that it is okay for him to sit there on a Sunday afternoon and not do anything. He can sit back in the chair, watch some TV and have a beer and let the kids do their thing. He used to go nuts. If he was awake, he was driving and he was pushing and he was always stressed out. And I would tell him, dude, you are going to kill yourself. And he was a millennial, but that was the idea, that they figured that hard work meant you would never stop moving. That's not the case. First off, if you're working hard to get done what you're doing it wrong. That's another thing that the younger generations seem to need to learn. It's work smart, not hard. Hell, it was Bill Gates that said that he would hire a lazy person to do a very difficult job than anybody else because the lazy person will figure out the easiest way to get the job done, which could be as much as they're just so goddamn lazy they walk away and someone else does it for them. But the lazy person will always figure out the easiest way to get the job done. So who do you decide is the hardest working generation? I mean, a lot of Gen X, it's physical work. Yes. And we do it. Millennials, it is a lot of everybody is, I took business or computer engineering or computer programming, everything to do with computers. That is great. But you guys are now in the same boat as lawyers are. There's just too goddamn many of you, and people are getting you cheaper and cheaper because most of you are average at what you do and you're not the exceptional performer. It's the same thing when you get in the trades. You'll get people that are really good at what they do, and then you'll get people that are excellent at what they do. They're way better. They can see the whole thing in advance, plan it out, work it out every hour, everything. I mean, when I'm looking at a build, I work it all out, right down to the hour, to the nail I'm using, the screw, what type, how many, where they're going in, whether those nails are going in that end of the building in the morning or afternoon of that day. It's all worked out and planned out. It makes the job so much easier. Does it ever actually work that way? No. Anybody that's ever built in the trades at all, no matter what trade it is, knows that it never works that way. It's kind of like the rule of planning a war, that your war plans are only good until the first moment you make contact with the enemy, and then everything changes. And it's the same thing with work. You can plan, and I'll tell you, don't ever give up your vacation and don't feel guilty. Millennials, especially Gen Z coming up, about taking your paid time off. That's not something that they grant you. That's something they owe you. It's owed to you. It's not the company doing you a favor. So take your vacation. Take your time when it comes around. I mean, when I was working for the one company, they granted us 3 weeks of vacation a year. But you couldn't take the first bit of your vacation until you've been there a full year. So this is what I did afterwards. That full year hit, and I took a week and I planned it out in amongst my days off. So my 7 days turned into 11. So I'd have 11 days off. Great. That's fantastic. 3 months later, 11 days off. 3 months later, 11 days off. 3 months after that, I'm now in my next year of vacation time, banked up and able to take. So every 3 months, I got a week and a half off. Playing that you're going to be a martyr in the workplace does not do anything. It doesn't do anything for you, but you want everybody to know you are. That was the thing when I was reading this from the Harvard Business Review, that they talked about how they wanted everyone to know they were the martyr in the workplace. Well, that's not being a true martyr in the workplace. You're just being the workplace dickhead. Nobody's going to like you. And then when you need someone to cover, they're not cover for you. People aren't going to help you. No wonder you were all so miserable at work all the time. But millennials are starting to figure it out. You're first and then work, but you can blend the two. So it works out just fine. You don't have to be stressed out. If you're totally stressed out, the job's not for you. If you wake up and you're going, don't go to work, find another job. Yeah, I know things are tough and everybody's rents are high and it's outrageous and you got to buy food and you got to pay bills. But you know what? Go to Starbucks a little less. You don't have to eat organic crap all the time because most of it is BS organic. It's not truly organic. I mean, if you look at anything in the food chain, half of what we eat is GMO of some kind, or they use something on it to preserve it and done. It's just anybody that pays 3 times as much for organic is fooling yourselves. The only way you're possibly going to guarantee organic is growing your own crap. And if you're going to do that, that's a huge investment in time, and you're not going to have a lot of time to do work somewhere else. So you're going to have to drastically change the way you live your life. But stop spending all that extra money. Don't go out and eat 4 nights a week. You know, you don't need to sit there and order out and have food, Uber Eats to you and all that shit. Why? Get out, walk a couple blocks and pick it up. It solves a whole bunch of things. You get some exercise. Exercise release endorphins, makes you feel better about yourself. Maybe it'll be easier to handle that crappy job the next day while you're looking for a better one. And another good tip. Do not look for another job while you're at work. I don't care how miserable it is. It's just unprofessional. Anyway, that kind of changed the way it was ranting about who was the harder worker. I think it's still up in the air. I'll give it 10 years, and then we'll decide which current generation is the hardest worker. And then it's going to be a toss-up between, is it millennials or Gen Z? And look up millennials. Unless you're willing to change the way you operate, you might still be the hardest workers, but you might not be the most productive. Because Gen Z definitely knows how to use technology. That's part of the perception we have where they're all just lazy and don't want to do anything. They might work hard. They got other issues. All right. Gen Z's got a whole buttload of other issues that I'm just not going to get into today. I mentioned something once about 4 months back in one video, and I immediately got an email from YouTube. So it ain't happening again. But we'll sit there and we'll decide down the road. I mean, right now, I'm sure, like me, a lot of Xers figure that we are the hardest workers because of the way we do physical work. And I mean, I'm a couple years off 50, and I can go out to the workplace and you can sit there and you get at the other kids for the trades. Is that a cat? Yeah, it is one of the cats. Sit there and I'll work circles around them, and they're half my age. They just don't have the physicality in them to do the job. So you gotta figure out what are the parameters to determine who's the hardest worker. I think a lot of it has to do in the end with who's the most productive. But at the same time, just because they work hard and they're very productive doesn't mean that the quality of work was any good. And if their quality of work isn't any good, then they're not a hard worker. They're just a sloppy worker. So until we can define who truly is the hardest working generation currently, because like I said, we'll never, ever, ever meet any qualification remotely close to the greatest generation and what they accomplished and the work they put in this world. So we had what we had growing up. No one will ever do that again. And it just will never be that way. Anyway, this is Drac saying until next time, peace out, everybody.